day, everyone. Greetings from Finland. I would like to thank the Foundation for giving me this interesting opportunity to speak to you about our organization and its work. I'm here representing the European Council of Autistic People, which enhances autistic-led advocacy and fosters connections between autistic people's organizations in Europe. So first, a little bit about what EUCAP is. It is an umbrella organization. There have been autistic people's groups and their foundations and associations in Europe much longer than there has been EUCAP. We founded EUCAP in 2019 after about 3 years of discussions and networking between organizations that existed previously. We found in Europe that it was actually rather difficult for us to find each other. Europe is full of language barriers and cultural barriers and political barriers. It was not an easy matter to simply do, for example, a search online to just locate others. So many of us, even after years of working as an autistic people's organization, were completely unaware of similar organizations in the next country, let alone halfway through Europe or on the other edge of Europe. So in this process of founding EUCAP, we discovered each other and each other's work, and that still continues. What EUCAP does, it helps to identify shared goals and advocacy themes across those language and cultural boundaries. We need to reach out to each other deliberately, discuss our views, compare our interests, compare the emphasis of advocacy in each of our countries. What it also does, and this is something that many people mentioned in the early stages, is that we need to amplify our voices. We cannot easily approach something like a European level organization of any kind as small national or regional autistic people's organizations. We feel that we would not have the capacity, we would not be taken seriously, would be too small to be heard. When we're together, we can reach out much more easily to international bodies, such as, for example, the European Disability Forum, where EUCAP now is a member organization, or to the UN Committee on the Rights of People with Disabilities. How EUCAP looks at the moment on the map. First, we started off as definitely a very northern and Western European organization. At the moment, we have 22 member organizations in 15 European countries. And the growth has been from north and west towards the south and east. And you can see on this that much of Eastern Europe we still have not reached. And we are aware that in many European countries it is still impossible or very, very difficult to form an autistic people's organization. We also have the policy for this reason of accepting some individual person members, particularly from countries where we know the situation to be very difficult. These are the logos of all our current member organizations in the summer 2022. I'm often asked what our member organizations do, what kind of organizations they are. So what is it that autistic adults will create and set up when forming the majority in an organization, when making all the core decisions about what gets done? I would roughly categorize the goals and the styles of our organizations into these 4 groups. Firstly, I see what I think of as generalists. And these are, for example, in Nordic countries, there often is a single large national organization that engages in pretty much everything. There's what I think of as the campaigners, which tend to be smaller, more focused in some specific action. Their goals can be defined quite differently from these generalist organizations. A small minority provides services, something that they can actually sell, and that brings in some of the funding for the organization. And then there are a couple of groups that I would call specialists, in that they have an even more focused, narrow goal. So a generalist organization usually see us offering membership to all autistic people in their country, or who are interested. And in this, they vary a little bit in how they define the membership, whether it is full membership for autistic people only, or whether they allow others, like family members, to also become person members of that organization. This type of organization often runs peer support groups, social meetings, online forums, events, but also engage in advocacy or engages in participatory research or other forms of cooperation with academia. These organizations usually get some income in the form of membership fees and small donations. And they may be members of national umbrella organizations. They may receive some funding from local and national funding bodies that support NGOs in the social and health sector in general. They have the possibility of applying for project funding in their countries. These type of organizations do not usually have huge international visibility or media visibility. No, they may have many members and they may do a lot of work, but much of it can be fairly invisible. The campaigner organizations have more focus on advocacy and generally influencing society. They don't usually invest their resources in running something like peer groups or online peer support. And these are much more visible. They will have websites, social media channels, YouTube. They will approach mainstream media to get their message out. Those that provide services are focused at least partly on providing those services, generating at least some of their own funding through this. For example, Adventor in Czechia, although it also has many other types of focus in advocacy and in generally supporting the local autistic community. They are also very accomplished at offering therapies, arts and crafts classes, in offering mentoring and support services related to employment, to studies, to supporting people to find housing and so on. And then our specialists have some very narrow, clearly defined tasks or goals, such as advocating and acting as an expert body in matters that concern autistic people with intellectual disabilities and high support needs. And this is the National Autistic Task Force in the UK specifically. We have no other organization that does this particular thing. There are two organizations that focus specifically on organizing an inclusive conference, and they are funded to some extent by attendance fees. There are some that focus mainly on developing participated research, following and commenting research, networking with researchers. What I've seen over the years is that each of these organizations has a unique set of strengths that often depends very much on some individual people within that organization. And of course, to some extent, it depends on the environment where they are doing their work. Some of these generalist organizations, for example, are the best listeners. They are in touch with the members' needs. They see a broad range of people and broad range of needs. They are good at providing accessible activities for large numbers of autistic people and a broad range of activities. Some are very good at event organizing. Some are good at publicity and campaigning. Some are good at engaging with government bodies or networking and cooperation with other organizations. And some have been learning to apply for funding and to manage projects. The specific skills and interests that we find in the member organizations can show in many ways. If you look at the activity of these organizations online, for example, you will see that some of them have incredibly beautiful websites. Some of them will display professional level graphics and general visual image, while others can be sort of minimalist in that way. Some of them have impressive YouTube channels with a lot of content and thousands of followers. Some of them will display their broad range of connections and sponsors, and some are very proud of their well-organized conferences. You'll find high-quality publications and training materials, and in a couple of cases, you see the operation of the organization's own community center. Just a couple of examples of a huge amount of work that deserves attention. This one is the independent guide to quality care for autistic people by the National Autistic Task Force in the UK, which I mentioned as a specialist organization. Here's some views from the website of Neuropeculiar, an Italian organization who are very good at doing videos. And this is from their series of informational videos called Autism Answers, where they have several autistic people responding to questions by parents and other interested members of the public about various things that have to do with autism. And they've gained a lot of followers, gained a lot of visibility, and they caption the videos in English to have an even broader reach. It's a little bit of what we do in Finland. We have one of these community centers of our own, which serves as a focal point, a place to develop things like our projects and workshops and to store our equipment. And in that way, can provide some service to people arriving from many parts of the country. And another aspect is we like to go out. We have people working to guide nature walks and excursions. and that provides an important part of our peer support and our social group activity. Adventure in Czechia has been running these climbing clubs for a long time, providing constructive hobby, and the physical activity that helps children and young people in particular to develop their motor skills and their self-confidence. So what we do together, firstly, I have to say that one of our challenges is, and has been for all these years, the fairly limited resources in general for all of our organizations separately and for us as an umbrella organization. So what we do together is limited by the number of people who are able to be active in their own country and at the same time can spare some of their resources to join this international work. It tends to be fairly few at a time, those who are autistic and capable of organizing and doing goal-oriented action are usually needed so badly in their own countries. We try to be kind of cautious in avoiding overusing their resources. But what we do together anyway is we occasionally run webinars. We have just had our third international online webinar on the 11th of June. The two previous ones were in 2021 and 2020. We engage in some advocacy when we do recognize a shared advocacy goal and a thing that all of our organizations feel strongly about. Then we can come together and write a resolution or a written submission to some public discussion that is going on. We connect with each other, we keep learning about each other. For this purpose, we occasionally run members' meetings where each organization can send some representatives. And we will discuss and learn what our take is on some issue. And that's where we can begin to identify those advocacy themes. As EUCAP, we reach out. As I mentioned before, a small national organization, it would be very hard. But for example, when we saw something happening in autism research that we were not very happy about, it was clear that many autistic people were not pleased, then we were able to say that we as EUCAP would like to connect with many others around the world to discuss this and see what we should do. So some of our current advocacy themes, the autism research theme that has been kind of initiated on our part with this, with the global autism, the autistic task force on autism research. It is a broader one also. It is one that we were kind of approaching before with our survey, starting to map what autistic people's preferences are regarding the emphasis of autism research in European countries. So the basic questions there are, why does it seem that with decades of autism research, our lives don't seem to be getting significantly better? Why is it that we still have so many challenges. Why do we have such trouble getting our basic rights respected, getting access to healthcare, getting disability services for those autistic people who need them? What is it actually that we can believe in as a focus of autism research to change our lives? And I think what we're learning and have repeatedly learned from our discussions and our survey is that there's very little faith among the autistic adults that we can reach in biomedical autism research doing anything significant for us in the foreseeable future. And also various methodologies, even once kind of globally considered a standard and good practice, we don't necessarily see them as changing anything significant. So what autistic adults seem to prefer very much is research that would focus on services that will make immediate change in lives, that would have an impact on the practical realities of autistic people of all ages. Another advocacy theme has come up with the war in Ukraine. We have, for example, connected with Autism Europe, which is the main umbrella organization for primarily parent-run autism organizations in Europe. We saw this as an area where we have shared goals and shared interests. We would all like to see the autistic people of Ukraine supported and reached, to get the help they need. So the questions in our minds has been, how can we broaden our connections within Europe? Because those so far have been weakest towards the furthest Eastern European countries. We have known practically nothing about the autistic adult community in Ukraine. We are just beginning to learn. So how can we reach autistic Ukrainians and understand their needs? What kind of a cooperation could possibly begin to arise from that? Something that we are just getting into is starting to map the views of our member organizations with regard to methodologies and practices based in behavioral science. This would be applied behavior analysis and various approaches derived from it or based in the same theories. And I'm sure many of you are aware that there are a lot of autistic voices criticizing such methods. We are quite certain that this also applies to EUCAP member organizations, but we do want to base our actions on really knowing what they think. So we think it is prudent to start open a discussion and really ask the organizations in every country what exactly their views are. Further advocacy themes, for example, something that started in Spain with the Spanish organization observing the high level of violence against autistic people in various forms. They ran a petition which got 87,000 supporters in Spain and they went to asking for certain things to fix the situation from their own government bodies. And as EUCAP, we were able to then show our public support with an open letter contacting the Spanish ministers in charge of these matters. And I hope that we contributed somewhat to the positive results that they got in Spain. Employment, this is kind of a permanent theme. Last year, we created a written contribution to a public discussion about a general comment on the UN CRPD article on employment. This is, of course, kind of a global matter when it's about UN CRPD. In that process, once again, we kind of discovered a lot about each other, about the organizations in Europe, and all of them basically have an interest in employment and how to improve the employment levels and the well-being at work of autistic people. So we put a lot of effort into that and wrote it with great care, and it kind of became a little resource on how we see the situations in our countries and on the literature that we can recommend and the approaches we can recommend for people to take when they're trying to promote employment. Something that's a very new connection for us, and where we also immediately recognize this as very much a shared interest and a shared theme, is the independent living. We started talking to another organization, the European Network on Independent Living, and participating in a process of creating guidelines to describe the principles of independent living for use by various authorities around Europe. Leaving with some links or websites where you can go to follow our work in the future. And at this point, I'd like to say that EUCAP is very much open to collaborations with organizations from other continents, from around the world, to the extent that our resources allow. And considering our focus, we of course, to some extent, prefer to collaborate with organizations run by autistic people, but that does not mean that we totally exclude the possibility of other kinds of partnerships. And we would be happy to hear about the general situation with autistic children, teens and adults in Korea. Thank you for your attention.